everyone. Kate Berkner here today with Dr. Tom Phelan, author and creator of 123 Magic, as well as the author of The Manager Mom Epidemic. Dr. Phelan, welcome.
Hi, Kay. How are you surviving?
I'm doing pretty well. We got a whole lot of snow in the Chicago area over the weekend, so we did some digging out from under that. But other than that, pretty good.
Good. One more month of winter.
That's what they say, but this is Chicago, so I feel like that means 1 to 4 more months of winter, so we'll see. I like your optimism, though.
Yes.
So today we are going to be talking about a perennial troublesome topic for parents, especially parents of younger kids, and that is tantrums. So let's start out. Dr. Phelan, can you tell us what a tantrum is?
Yeah, tantrum is an extreme emotional expression of a young child. That's an expression of frustration, and it's often so extreme that it's very bewildering to parents. A lot of parents think the child looks like they're insane, when in reality, the person who's insane during a tantrum is the parent. The kid's fine, but the parents are insane. These are very upsetting events, and they generally happen in the young kids, about ages 1.5 up to 5. So very common event, but very, very frustrating, upsetting to the adults.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if we haven't learned not to fall prey to the little adult assumption, and we think that problems can be handled with logic and reasoning. A tantrum defies all of those things.
It certainly does, and logic and reasoning is usually one of the worst things you can do once it's started. Um,
So why do kids have tantrums?
Well, basically, if you look at it, number one, they don't have a lot of emotional control. Now, some people think adults aren't so hot at that either, but kids in the preschool category, they don't have a lot of emotional control, and they do tantrums when they are frustrated. They either wanted a thing like a lollipop, or they wanted an activity. They wanted your iPad 10 minutes before dinner, or they don't want an activity. They don't want to go to bed. So it's that thing, activity thing. There's a request involved that's denied, and we call that a parental veto. So when you don't give the kids what they want, they're frustrated. They have this lack of emotional control, and nuclear bomb goes off.
So if I think about the way that I interact with my kids who are 3 and 6, there are a lot of asks that are made throughout the day, and there are a lot of times that I have to say no to things like lollipops before breakfast or video games in the middle of the day. How often can we expect kids to have tantrums given how often they're hearing no?
Yeah, given the statistics tell us the peak tantrum age is 2, and about 20% of 2-year-olds will have daily tantrums. Now, when they get a little older than that, 3 and 4, it's more like 10%, but that's 10% daily tantrums. And you're absolutely right. You can't give them everything they want, so you have to say no a lot of times during the day. We like to see the tantrums kind of diminishing by age 5, where you're not getting them, that often. If we're still getting tantrums at age 5 and 6, then we usually have a problem.
Got it. So, the question on all parents' minds is, how do you stop a tantrum?
Well, let's go a step before that. And how do you prevent a tantrum? So there are 2 things. One is, if a child makes a request, sometimes you're real busy during the day and they make a request that you could say yes to, but you're in a bad mood, and so you say no. Okay, you just set yourself up for a tantrum, but that's a bad thing. If you can say yes, give them what they want. Now, if they don't want to go to bed, you can't say you don't have to go to bed, and so on. But that's one thing. So give them what they want. Second thing is, do a good veto. If you're going to say no properly. A good veto is brief. It comes with one explanation if absolutely necessary, and it's followed by silence. The logic thing that you were talking about before, and trying to re-explain and all that, what that boils down to many times is simply what I call parental whimpering. If you look at the parent's tone of voice when they're doing that, the tone of voice says to the child, I am afraid of you, my child, and I hope you don't give me a hard time. Please do what I want you to do. The parent is confessing their inability to handle this and their fear of the tantrum. And of course, that's like lighting the fuse.
Definitely. And I would imagine that that may come into play more often in public.
It does, because you are more vulnerable in public. You ask parents, it's interesting, we did this a few years ago. We asked parents, what are you most afraid of in public? And their first response was the fear of public embarrassment, which is a normal thing. You don't want to look like an idiot parent in front of the whole grocery store filled with people. And the parents' second thing was, I don't want to get reported to child welfare. And so they were also afraid that if they didn't do exactly the right thing, that they would, and it's happened, people have gotten reported. But the thing is, kids can sense in you by your manner, your tone of voice, your look on your face. They can sense when you're afraid, and they can sense that fear of public embarrassment. And that means they're going to push you faster, harder, and more often in public. That's the fact of the matter.
And probably in private as well, if they can sense that you're weak and you're about to break, and you may give them that lollipop before breakfast or the iPad before dinner. So obviously prevention is better, ounce prevention, pound of cure, that sort of thing. But I think a lot of us will find ourselves in a situation where we've not been able to prevent the tantrum and now it's happening. So your kid is in full on screaming, maybe they've thrown themselves on the ground, maybe they're hitting you, maybe they've turned and hit a sibling. What do we do with a child once they've started having the tantrum?
Okay. What you do, the first thing you have to do is you have to think. And the first thing I want you to think is tantrums are normal. And number two, tantrums are a result of good parenting. You get this kid screaming at you, and the look on their face makes you feel like a heel. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. You did what you were supposed to do. The next thing you want to do is think, in the first 10 seconds after their tantrum starts, what do you usually do? We have what we call the 10-second rule. That means once a tantrum starts, you have 10 seconds only to make up your mind how to come up with a calm and decisive strategy. Whimpering and logic is not a calm and decisive strategy. Who's insane here? The parent is insane. Who needs a therapist? The parent needs a therapist. The kid's fine. They survive tantrums, all the time. So what are you going to do after that? After you think logically, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to check out as much as you can. That means you're not going to talk, you're going to drop eye contact and so on. If you're in a grocery store, what I used to do, I would turn the cart around. The child's right in front of me, sitting in front of, and they start tantruming about something. I turn the cart around, push it from the back. That's the best I can do in a grocery store. I could leave them, off a ways for a while. If they're at home, they might go in a pack and play. Tantrums are for your room or something like that. But you're not going to talk, and you're not going to engage. And then you're going to write it out or sit it out. And this is a time when, for many parents, this is, for me, and I think a lot of people, it's really upsetting. You really have to, it's okay, it's normal, I did a good thing, I'm not a bad parent. And you have to keep telling yourself that while you're checking out. And if necessary, if it goes on for longer, you could do a rest period, timeout, whatever. And in a sense, that's kind of a consequence as well. But you can't engage them. And some people say, well, I want to give them a hug. That's when they need me the most. I think you're wrong. If you give a child a hug and that works without giving them what they want, which is the last thing you can do or want to do, you give them a hug and that works fine. But I think most of the time that doesn't work. I think you need to let them work it out and you work it out separately.
Got it. So let's talk about two kind of, I would call them common complicating factors for tantrums. One of them is, what do I do if my child is having a tantrum and they start hitting? Whether they're hitting me or hitting maybe an older or younger sibling, a friend, someone who's near them and isn't quite as sturdy as I am. Obviously, if I'm not supposed to be engaging with the child and letting them write it out, that's fine. But if they've started hitting, it feels like there may be another step needed there.
Yeah, and what we have here is a safety issue. So you have a couple of options. One is you could use counting from 1, 2, 3 magic. You could say that's one. Now the problem with that is they may be so emotionally over aroused at the time that that's not going to do any good. But you can certainly try it. The second thing is you have two choices. Either you can take them and remove them physically if they're small enough, and we're going to go to rest period, timeout, or whatever. And you try and do that as quickly as you can because they may get in a few blows before you get there. The other thing we've done some of the time, and it sounds a little strange, but is you remove the other people so they can't hit. So a lot of moms, what I'll have them do is lock themselves in the bathroom. And this sounds kind of strange. You could say, well, the kid is out there, and they're screaming and yelling. Well, at least you know where they are. They're on the other side of the bathroom door. And so you lock yourself in the bathroom and you kind of ride it out there. But you're correct. There's a safety issue when hitting is involved. And if that's a big thing and it's still going on, then I think you do need to find a therapist to help you, because there may be other diagnoses such as ADHD, bipolar, other things that maybe you need to deal with.
Gotcha. So if we're having a tantrum and the child does end up needing to go to rest period for, whether safety concerns or whatever else, the 1, 2, 3 magic would, I believe, suggest that timeout doesn't start until you're quiet. So they finish their tantrum and then they start their rest period, or a parent's instinct may be, oh, okay, good, they're quiet now, I can go ahead and let them out.
Yeah, so the answer to that question depends on their age. So what we do with the kids who are 4 years old and over, so they they go into rest period and they're still tantruming. The timeout is going to start when they are done with the tantrum, and you tell them that one time. So it means if say it's a 4 or 5 minute timeout and they tantrum for an hour, the 5-minute timeout is going to start in an hour. Okay, when they're done with the tantrum. And some kids will go on for a long time. Some will do 10 minutes, and then you start the 5 minutes. And that, if they're under 4, what we're going to do is we're going to just leave them in for a couple of minutes, like a typical rest period time, and then we're going to let them out. But there's an art to letting them out. What you don't do is go, open the door, take off the gate, and say, now are you going to be good? Do you understand what you did? Blah, blah, blah. That's a good way to provoke a kid and start another tantrum. And so what you do is you say, time's up, you take off the gate and all that, and you walk away. Now, and some kids will say, if they can talk, I'm not coming out, or they'll just stay in there. That's fine. Leave them alone. Don't do anything to them. Some kids will follow you and they'll start hitting you again or yelling again. Then they're going to go right back. They're going to get counted. They'll go right back again. So, but the ones that are over 4, and even sometimes the ones that are a little bit younger than that, if you've been through this a lot, is we're going to let them go at it. The other thing too is if there's anything dangerous or harmful in their room, if they have a hammer and a saw in there, get those out before the timeout. If your mother has her Hummel collection on top of their dresser, get those babies out of there before the timeout, so it's a safe place.
Yes, for both the child and any valuables you might have. Sure. I think we've talked about previously that my youngest is not necessarily destructive, but very curious, to the point where we would come in at the end of rest period, which was only like 2 or 3 minutes, and all the drawers would be emptied and there was a Vaseline incident. And so definitely keeping in mind what they can get into while they're in there, for sure.
Yes, and I get the Vaseline out. The drawer is emptying. If they're going to wreck the room, what we do is if they wreck the room, they come out, timeouts, and you leave it like that. Don't clean it up right away, and just wait till they get through this testing phase, and then at the end of it, in a couple of weeks or whenever, you clean up the room together.
Sure. Okay, great. So then the other kind of complicating factor that I wanted to ask about is what happens if a child has a tantrum at bedtime? This is a question that I hear from parents often, is, if the child is having a tantrum, or if the child refuses to go to bed and then gets counted, if they're refusing to do something and a parent is trying to use counting to get them to do it, bedtime is kind of a complicating factor there, because you're trying to create a calm environment and something that's restful and get them to start doing this. You obviously don't want them to be up an extra 30 minutes just because they're yelling at you. How do you kind of handle tantrums and bedtime?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're not going to use counting for bedtime, because bedtime is a positive behavior or a start behavior, and you need to have a routine. So you need to have a basic bedtime routine. It's going to take about 20 to 30 minutes before bedtime. So you pick a bedtime, say 9 o'clock, and then at 8:30 you're going to start getting ready. With the little kids, the preschoolers, you're going to help them through the bath, brush, all that kind of thing. With kids, 5, 6 and older, they can do it themselves. And then when they're ready for bed, they get in. You have them get into their bed, and you sit on the bed and either talk to them or read them a story or whatever up until 9 o'clock. Now it's lights out. You put on a floor fan, kiss them goodnight, and you're free for the rest of the evening, except they follow you out of the room and down to the kitchen if you try and leave. So, or they tantrum, as you were saying before. What we're going to do with these kids is we're going to do cut them off at the pass. You're going to sit in a chair in the doorway with your back to them with a good book, not an iPad or a phone, and you're going to read till they go to sleep. Now, the first couple of nights, they may tantrum, means they're not going to sleep for an hour or so. Well, that's too bad. But after bedtime, you can't talk to them and they can't leave the room. All the stuff for bed has to be done, potty, drink, snack, pajamas, brush, all that's done as part of the basic routine. So it's no fun, but it's an investment in your future, because if you if you stick to it and they know exactly what the routine is and you rehearse it during the day when nothing bad is happening, you can get them to. So I did with my son. It took us a couple of weeks. He climbed out of his crib for the first time, but we had him in a junior bed in a couple of months. But you have to have that routine down. So if they tantrum, that's too bad. They're not leaving that room. It's still bedtime. You're not talking to them. You're blocking the door, but you're also reassuring them with your presence, and it works. It's just a big investment, emotional, and it takes some time.
Short-term pain for long-term gain, though, right?
Exactly.